I give it a 5-star. Why do I give it a 5-star? Is because I like it, right? This is what we call the multifamily rental. What is a multifamily rental? And I'm just going to jump into it, and let's talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of it. What is a multifamily rental, right? Multifamily rental is when you've got a block of flats, maybe. That's a multifamily. So multi means many. So you've got many families in one property. Or we've also heard of multi-lets. So multi-lets, again, it might mean that you've got one house and you've got many tenants in there. We are not a big fan of multi-lets. They are painful. Room rental, like that's painful to manage, but you can get some good yields out of it. You can get some good profit out of it, right? But let's talk about the disadvantages and advantages of multifamily rental. Lots of demand, yes, right? So we spoke about that 2-bed, 1-bath. It means that if there's 10 of them, you own everything, right? Monthly cash flow is high, yes, good, because obviously now your asset is much bigger. And your portfolio growth is faster, 100%, because now you're buying one block, right? And as you're buying one block, it means that the moment that you're going to trigger on into the next one, your number of tenants is increasing, right? And that's how we've managed to get to around about 200 tenants, because we started buying blocks of flats much earlier, right? The other one is that from a vacancy perspective, if a couple of people don't pay you for whatever reason, and even if your rental guarantee doesn't kick in, it's not a total loss, right? So it's not 100% total loss. So which means that you can weather the storm. As you're going along, you can weather the storm, right? Now, the tenant's type of it, depending on what it is, on what kind of a block of flats it is. And by the way, also remember on multifamily rentals, you can get, like, let's say, in some of these properties that I'm also fond of finding, you get to have shops in the front, and then at the back you've got back rooms, or you got shops in front, and then on top you've got residential. I also like that, right? And the other reason why I like doing that, buying such kind of property, is that you can actually have a business at the bottom, and the people that are on top or at the back, they're also feeding in that business. So which means that if you're, a little bit clever, and I'm talking here about, the cash flow. If you're a little bit clever, what you can do is you can have the tenants paying you rent, and let's say in the shop, you are actually also another business, but you own the business, and you become a tenant to yourself. And in that business, you're doing other business in there. Because remember, if you're doing property and you're doing it very well, you've got lots of dead time in between, right? And that dead time, you can utilize it for other things. But that's just like a very, I want to call it an advanced strategy. So you're doing multiple things on one property. However, also from a multifamily perspective, it comes with these pros and cons. It's also kind of like difficult for the beginners, guys that are starting off, because you're seeing this whole thing and you're thinking, oh, it is so big. Or no one in your family or no one in your circle has ever done this. So it is so far-fetched out. And that was one of my things, I didn't have anyone who had ever done it. So to me, it was so far-fetched out of my mind, right? But I also like this because it's one of those properties where you can do seller finance, right? The flip side of it is that it's difficult to find, it's difficult to bond. So it's difficult to find money in it, but it's good to do seller finance. So whilst you are sorting it out to make it pretty and all of those things, you can get to make the bank like the place. So there's so many of these places out there that you can go and find them in a very dilapidated place, and you can actually bring them to life. We've got a couple of those that we have done in the past. However, not a lot of people know how to manage these kind of properties, right? So it's very difficult to outsource the management part of it. This is why we actually started off the business Frost Peak, where we self-manage, and we're also now starting to manage for other investors as well. So we don't manage for anyone else who's not an investor. Only for investors, we will manage that. Okay. So these are kind of like the pros and the cons of this. And I want to take you to the fact that I spoke about seller finance, right? We have got a course that we have done, and that course, it's literally 497, right? And if you have ever done one property or two properties, right? If you've done one or two properties, I want you to type in the comments there how many properties you have done. And if you're looking for seller finance, that's what I'd like to find from you. So in the comments there, I want you to tell me how many properties you've done. This, I'm not going to give seller finance to someone who's done zero. You need to be doing fundamentals. But if you've done one or two, yes, you can go and do the seller finance course because you understand the process of acquiring a property. You understand the lingo. Now, I want to go in and show you this particular deal. It's a 5-star for me. I've got it out in Boxbag. And literally, here I want to kind of like give you a step-by-step process because this deal, normally this deal, even seasoned investors, they kind of like ask me, TJ, how did you get it right? Okay, so we're going to go through it very slowly. A seller finance is called an installment sale, right? How did I find this property? Online, again, Property 24, right? Now you know Property 24. And whilst I was on Property 24, I go through to my estate agent. There was literally one picture on there, and my estate agent took me to the place. It used to be a warehouse with offices. That's what it used to be, right? Next door to it is a double story. Next door to it is a church. Across the road, there's a lot of rental places there for commercial shops and other 2 beds, 1 bath and things like that. And I looked at it and I'm like, this warehouse is misplaced, man. It's literally misplaced. And I looked at it with my architect and I said, how can we make it a livable house? How can we make it a livable house? And we looked at it, we said, okay, fine. In the front, let's do shops. We said, in the front, let's do shops. So right in the front, if you're looking at my picture here, right here on this side, this is a shop, a long shop. That's another long shop. And we've got 3 tenants there who are shops, right? So they're retailers. At the back, we then made it all to be self-contained units, right? We're banking at $2,000, 3,500 on each unit there. But what happens is that, for instance, one of my guys who's actually renting for us, he's called Ali. He's got a shop where he sells groceries, all sorts of stuff, right? Guess who are his customers? It's the guys that are at the back. It's the guys, if we had an upstairs, it will be the guys who are on the top, right? So having said that, we literally bought this property on an installment sale. Now, 3 things that you need to look out for when you're doing an installment sale is that an installment stipulates from a time perspective that it mustn't be less than 12 months and it mustn't be more than 5 years, all right? Less than 12 months and more than 5 years. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it mustn't be less than 3 payments, all right? And then the last thing is that it has to be registered at the deeds office, all right? That's what an installment sale. And what it is that it's a guideline that they give you, but it's now up to you with what I've just mentioned now and everything else that comes through with an installment sale. When do you pay deposit and all of those things? Who's going to be paying for rates and taxes? Again, that's what we talk about in this course here that we're talking about, right? So we unpack that in terms of how does an installment sale work. Not all properties will work for an installment sale, okay? So there's a number of things that fit an installment sale. The first one is that the property needs to be ready for an installment sale. So what do I mean by that? It means that if you look at it on the other side, if you flip it, the bank doesn't want to finance it. So which means that you can actually literally tell your seller that, look, I'd like to buy the property, but there's no bank that is going to finance this. Not all properties fit an installment sale. So there's a number of things that fit an installment sale. The first one is that the property needs to be ready for an installment sale. So what do I mean by that? It means that if you look at it on the other side, if you flip it, the bank doesn't want to finance it. So which means that you can actually literally tell your seller that, look, I'd like to buy the property, but there's no bank that is going to finance this. And for that reason, now you're kind of like 50% into your installment sale. But you also need to look at the individual. Why are they selling? If they are selling highly distressed and they want the money now, then that's not going to work. Because the nature of the installment sale is that someone needs to wait for their money. Now, let's come back to this deal. We bought it for 700, right? But we only paid 50,000 as deposit. And we said we were going to pay him at month 13, the 650. So which means that he was ready to wait out, which also meant that he was happy for us to move in and to turn the building into what we wanted. And that's exactly what we did. So for roundabout, the renovation took us maybe about 4.5 months. And we were in the peak of winter in 2017, 18. And we worked hard. And eventually, we had 3 shops at the back, and we got 10 units at the back, self-contained. And all of those units now, they're giving us a rental income of 40,000. Okay. So month around about 7, 8, we started talking to the bank. So remember, we bought it for 700. We've paid a deposit for how much? For 50,000, right? So deposit is 50,000. We're going to pay 650 in month number 13, right? However, in 5 months, we're now we have renovated the place. We now have tenants. Month number 7, we are 100% fully tenanted. At month number 8, we went to the bank. Month number 8, we went to the bank. We've got an installment sale, right? And at the bank, we said, can you finance our property? And then the bank gave us 1.5. When the bank gave us 1.5, remember, we still need to pay 650 to the owner of the property. Is that so? So you subtract now the 1.5 and you pay out the seller. So the seller, you pay them out. If you subtract that together with your 400,000 that you've got, right? And together with the 50,000 of the deposit, how much are you left with? I want to see who's been paying attention there. So you financed this for 1.5 million, right? You bought the property for 700. You've got a renovation cost for 400. So how much are you left with? Now, someone says 450, no. 350, no. 400, definitely. Right. Led to 400. So 100%. Now, the 400 that I've got, this is not free cash. I want to say that it can actually be free cash if you want. Because what happens now is that your rental, we said we've got a rental of 40,000 here, 39,998. Your rental can carry your bond if you take the entire 1.5. So which means that this 400,000, you can actually go out and utilize it for something else, right? So maybe I can go to Boxburg or even Kempton Park and I can buy a 2-bed, 1-bath, but this time around, I'm buying it cash, right? Remember our first 2-bed, 1-bath, we bought it for 160, we added in another 50, so that was a 210. So you can literally buy that on cash. And now you got 5,000. And now you got 2 properties, 1 bond. Sneaky, eh? I know. Now you see why I like these kind of properties, and you see why we are saying that we like to give it a 5-star.
but I think once you get that installment sale or the delayed sale, if you can convince the seller of doing that, then these type of deals are they're really awesome, and they're everywhere. You can actually find a lot of these around. And I think the trick is that I want to add though is that, you know, when you want to get these, it's better to get them from a person that where it's not their primary home, to try and do a seller finance with them, because where it's your primary home, those guys might want to need their money immediately because they want to go and finance a home that they may be moving provinces or whatever, so they won't be open to doing this sort of thing.
My encouragement to you is that go and do the property fundamental course, you know, because the property fundamental course is designed to make you see what the normal eye sees, right? That's what that fundamental is all about. Remember back in the days, for me, property was just as good as seeing developments. That's what I would see. Those were opportunities for me, right? But outside of that, there was nothing else that I could see. But because now I went to school and I got educated, I started seeing other opportunities.